And that's a perfect segue into the question where we look at a map and we see obviously the landscape of the Middle East with these borders that seem almost like we should be using erasers at this point. Take a tour of the Middle East for us and explain. You've got national interests, you've got sectarian interests, you have national security interests, then you have obviously oil interests that are going on. They're commingled. There's resentments that are centuries old. Talk about the concerns nation by nation, if you will, or regionally, and your nightmare scenario, if this isn't contained, how it could really spill over and turn into a whole regional conflagration.
Sure. So just to quickly walk through the different regional players, of course, Iran is a big one. It's allied with both the current Iraqi government and with the government in Syria. So it's doing its best to keep both the Assad regime and the Maliki regime in power. It's allied with Hezbollah in Lebanon, which has also been fighting on behalf of the Assad regime in Syria, and we expect to probably see more of them in Iraq as things go forward. So that's sort of one side of the conflict. On the other side, you have the Sunnis, who for a long time under Saddam and even before ruled Iraq, even though they're a minority. The United States invasion removed them from power, so they feel disenfranchised. In Syria, they're the majority, but they've been ruled over by the Alawites, the sect that the Assad family comes from, and they're a minority there. So you have a lot of minority dynamics between Shia and Sunni and different Islamic groups. In Lebanon, you also have, again, the difference between Shia and Sunni, and there you have a significant Christian population. You have Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf states, which are Sunni and see themselves as protecting the Sunni of these other countries, and so that's another side. You have Jordan, that's also primarily Sunni and would like to, as you point out, try and, if anything, just minimize the number of refugees that are flowing into the country. I mean, Jordan still has Iraqi refugees from the 2003 war. You've had Syria added to that. Now you have even more refugees flowing in from Iraq. And so the analogy people have made is Jordan is the region's lifeboat, but even the lifeboat can be swamped. So that's sort of another side. And the U.S. finds itself in a very odd position of being against the Assad regime, which is an Iranian ally, but also wanting to support the Maliki regime in Iraq, which is an Iranian ally. So we're, in a sense, on different sides of the same war, depending on which country you're in, which does give the U.S. some additional options, but it also really complicates anything we do. And that's apart from any of the other regional factors going on, like Iran's nuclear program, which of course is the big worry of Israel. I mean, Israel worries a lot about spillover from Jordan and Lebanon and Syria as well, but they also worry about Iran's nuclear program, which also plays a big part in how people look at things.
You mentioned about basically complete dissatisfaction, not just in the U.S.'s part, but so many others with al-Maliki and the government that he put together, and freezing out different voices, different sectarian voices as part of that government. Is that enough, Austin, that if he finds religion, if you will, here and says, listen, if I'm going to get airstrikes, I got to make major concessions, is opening up the government to different voices at this point enough of a cork that you can put on the bottle, or has that ship sailed?
I'm afraid the ship may have sailed. I don't want to sound too hopeless, because you always hope that change can happen, and I think it's certainly still possible. But the Sunnis are looking at having promises made to them about being included years ago that haven't been fulfilled, and that was when the U.S. could play a major role, having boots on the ground as an honest broker. Now, with a very limited involvement, our leverage to be an honest broker is less. And of course, Maliki's initial response to this hasn't been to try and include more Sunnis. It's been to ask Iran for more assistance and to mobilize Shia militias. So unless things are quickly turned around, I think it's going to be very difficult to reverse this trend. And you asked about nightmare scenarios. The nightmare scenario is that this continues to spiral out of control into a regional Sunni-Shia confrontation. Right? Lebanon is an obvious next flashpoint that could go. In fact, it will be amazing if this doesn't spill over into Lebanon eventually. Of course, Jordan then will be surrounded on multiple sides with an ongoing civil war. So even though it doesn't have significant Shia population, just in terms of the refugees there, it could have spillover. then it's going to be tough for Israel to remain isolated, even though the Israelis do a pretty good job of securing their borders. And then, of course, it can spill over into Saudi Arabia, which does have a small Shia population, but that Shia population is concentrated in the eastern province where a lot of oil is. So you could imagine, in a nightmare, which I don't necessarily think is likely at this point, but is possible, much of the broader Middle East could be on fire, including important oil-producing regions.
Finally, Austin, obviously when it relates to U.S. interests, I'm not even talking about as it relates to oil and energy, I'm talking national security. Mike Rogers, who is the House Intelligence Committee chairman, he said the following: this, talking about the unfolding situation in Iraq, is as dangerous as it gets, warning that the growing al-Qaeda contingent presents a problem, and I'm quoting here directly, that he says we're either going to have to face in New York City or we're going to face it in Iraq. Is that hyperbole, or do you think he's right, that if unaddressed here, this becomes the biggest threat to our own national security on mainland America?
I think that's a little bit of hyperbole, but it's not wrong. The big threat that I see coming out of this is, as I mentioned, the Iraq battlefield has become the Iraq and Syria battlefields have become the mobilizing cry for international jihadis, including folks from the United States and Europe. And they go there, they get training, they become even further radicalized, and of course they already have U.S. or European passports, and then they can come home. And that is a real worry. Our intelligence services and Homeland Security are pretty good at identifying foreign threats, but it's a lot tougher when people are already citizens and can go and then come back. So I think that's the big worry, is not that it's a direct threat in terms of ISIS holding territory and being able to have training camps per se, but it's that you'll have people that blend in the United States, have passports, go there, come back, and next thing you know, again, there is an attack on the U.S. homeland.
Austin, I appreciate very much here trying to compress for all of us a region with shifting dynamics by the hour, let alone by the day, and compressing it in less than 15 minutes for us. Austin Long, thank you again.
Thanks again. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, everybody, I want you to sound off on this as well. Go over to Facebook and Twitter and answer our question of the day that we've posed, which is, does the chaos in Iraq pose a threat to us here in the U.S.? Up next, a number of House Republicans reacting to America's involvement in the crisis in Iraq and the president's move to keep troops off the battleground. Is this the right call? Well, after the break, military analyst Michael Lyons and our panel join us right here at the desk.